listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. Here's your Overwatch League daily episode for January 6th, 2018. The LA Valiant have added 2 more to their coaching staff. Last night, Valiant CEO Noah Winston announced that they would be adding Julian Damon Ducross and Jordan Gunba Graham as assistant coaches going to the Overwatch League inaugural season. Damon worked with Gamers Origin as a coach before moving to Movistar Riders as an analyst, and then last August, Rogue brought Damon on as a coach as well. He's going to be joining his former Rogue players, Soon and Unco. Up to this point, Gunba has not been credited as a coach. However, the Australian has considerable competitive Overwatch experience with the Australian World Cup and Blank Esports. He was originally hired to work with the Valiant as an analyst, but his success in the preseason and working with the team saw him promoted to the role of assistant coach. The Valiant made one more signing today. The team announced that Dr. Doug Gardner would be joining the team as the Director of Player Performance. Dr. Gardner has experience working with coaches and athletes in the MLB, NFL, Olympic sports, and even participants in competitive youth sports. He is also a certified mental performance coach through the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. Lastly, the Valiant announced that Dongwook Kim, known as Ooks, would no longer be with the Valiant. Ooks has been the Immortals coach since June of 2017, and no additional information was given surrounding his leaving the Valiant. There are some exciting matches in the first week of Overwatch League, and near the top of the list has to be the New York Excelsior facing off against the Houston Outlaws. The New York Excelsior consists of the core of Luxury Watch Blue and the addition of Libero from Meta Athena. While none of the players have a major premier win under their belt, not including the Overwatch World Cup that is, they have extensive LAN experience in the prestigious Overwatch Apex tournaments. On the flip side, you have the Houston Outlaws. The FNRGFE core has been improved with the addition of Jake from LG Evil, Spree and Raucus from FaZe Clan, and Mendo Kusai, formerly of Cloud9. Today I'm joined by Overwatch Pacific Championship caster and analyst for Full Circle, Kevin Avril Walker, to discuss this matchup. First, let's talk about the Houston Outlaws. In the preseason, they faced the Dallas Fuel and the Seoul Dynasty, and they only lost by 1 map in both of those matches. Do you think that this is indicative of a team that can finish in the top tier in the league?
I was actually very impressed with the Outlaws' performance in the preseason. Now, a lot of people, myself included, came into their matches believing they would be thoroughly outclassed against both opponents, but I think now we've all been thoroughly proven wrong on match day. The really crazy thing is, not only could they have won against both Dallas and Seoul, but I think maybe they even should have won against them. They just fell short. And for a team that is still majorly lacking in polish, they got really good results. The raw skill of the roster, I think, is certainly undeniable. They've got some of the very best the West has to offer. Muma and Coleman have insane synergy together. Jake and Lynx are both huge stars. Raucus is a phenomenal support who's in contention to be probably one of the best Xana or Ana supports in the West. And beyond that, the rest of the roster is also flexible enough to get them over any hurdle of a major meta shift. I don't think anyone doubts their raw talent. The issue, however, is in their polish and experience. So despite coming in with 5 members of FNRGFE, I don't think you're going to see more than 3 of them playing at once. Now, Houston may disagree with my point here, but from an outsider's perspective, the 5 members I previously mentioned are the best 5 members on the team. The issue there you're then presented with is, what combination of your roster are you going to run, taking into account who your best players are? And it's not as easy as just adding 1 player to the other 5 that I've mentioned. Your quote-unquote best players may not always be the best possible combination of players to run in every situation. For example, just because Jake and Lynx are your best DPS players doesn't mean you want to run them both at the same time. Clockwork might end up being one of the best tracers on the team, which means despite falling short of Jake and Lynx on some of the other roles, you might still run him beside one of the two and benching the other. The biggest problem I have with Houston is despite coming in with huge talent, they still look like a ragtag group. Too many times they've had to rely on either Jake or Raucus to pull off a huge play from left field in order to be in the game. Now the good news is from that, they're very good at snowballing individual plays into building momentum to win a game, but eventually they're going to hit a serious ceiling where they'll realize raw mechanics can only get them so far. However, what they can be proud of right now is they've still achieved a very good competitive results against two of the top teams, two of the favorite teams, without even having their main coach present. Now that Tyrone has recently arrived in the country and he's been shuffled into the Houston deck, I'm expecting some huge refinement out of their team, which will give them a serious shot at top placement in the overall the league when we get into it just in a couple of weeks. And with that being said as well, this is now a team that may have some serious potential going in and might end up becoming the new Western Hope over Dallas.
Let's switch gear over to the NYXL then. You could argue that they played probably the best team and one of the worst teams out of the entire league, at least from what we've seen so far. So it's a bit difficult to see how they're going to perform consistently. But as they take on Houston, how should they go about taking them down?
Before I really get into it, I want to say right off the bat, this is a really exciting matchup because there's been a lot of community debate over which team is better. Scott Tester, who you'll know as Bare Hands, the director of player personnel for NYXL, has mentioned in a previous podcast that he was personally looking forward to this matchup to finally settle the score and put to rest the community perception of who's better. Not only that, but Outlaws are now facing the LW Blue half of the USA versus Korea rematch, where on one side you've got Jake, Raucus, and Coolmat, and on the other side, you've got Mano, Sabiolbi, and Pine, who we can say is just about close enough of a counterpart for Flower, who's currently still underage. Now, we've already witnessed how close the run-in Jake and friends had with the Lunatic high half of the rematch, so this one I'm sure will be a highlight as well. The other thing that's quite exciting is to consider that so far in the preseason, we haven't seen either of these two teams anywhere close to their full strength. And with Tyrone only having just landed in the US, I'm also expecting the Outlaws to now be grinding into a totally new gear. With NYXL, they've also now got their flex support Jonak after turning 18 finally in late December. So that's going to be freeing Libero back into his preferred DPS slot, simultaneously plugging any holes remaining in NYXL support line, as well as adding some serious firepower to their DPS line. Any role-based weaknesses we saw from New York should now be addressed. There aren't really any more excuses now for this team now that the roster is complete, so the bigger question is, have Houston also fixed up their issues? Has Tyrone had enough time with the team to make sure they're match fit on match day? Because if not, that's going to add a lot of issues where NYXL can find a lot of holes to now poke through. The first of which is, how is the Tracer matchup going to be handled? Sabiolbi is probably one of the best Tracer duelists in the league. He's got a hyper-aggressive 1-versus-1 playstyle and specifically looks for duels against other Tracers. Right now, though, I'm not sure if any of Houston's Tracers have the dueling capability to consistently take him down and or stick to their own game plan while keeping Sabiolbi in check. You really need to have both Jake and Lynx on their best heroes as well, because none of them are on Tracer. Houston's only real Tracer specialist is Clockwork, but at this stage, I'm also not convinced that he can take on Sabiolbi head-to-head. Houston's other problem, once again, comes down to player choices as it becomes more obvious what Houston's strengths and weaknesses are. So if you're NYXL and you see Spree playing instead of Coolmat, you have to expect the possibility of a Zarya to be in the pool. If Jake plays, you need to watch out for his Junkrat and his Soldier. If Lynx is on the field, you have to prepare for Genji and Widow. If Clockwork's in there, you got to expect Tracer and McCree. And if Mendo's in there, well, expect a free win.
You mentioned that Tyrone is now in Houston. He's now, well, technically LA, and he's going to be making more meaningful impacts on this Houston Outlaws team. So if you were the Outlaws and you've got Tyrone there now, you've got your coaching staff, what would you be looking to do against NYXL to give your team the edge?
If Houston are going to look at NYXL, they need to keep in check Sabiolbi's Tracer, bring in Lynxer to challenge Pine's Widow, and have a stack of cards ready for anything Libero comes to the table with. Otherwise, Outlaws' focus right now really needs to be primarily on themselves and not on the other team. Without wanting to sound cliched, their biggest opponent is themselves and not the other team. They almost beat Dallas. They almost beat Seoul on raw skill. If they can tap into those strengths again without the drawbacks, then they can take on New York too. I've already mentioned player choices are going to be important for Houston. If they want to succeed, they need to find the most effective roster combination for any given situation. I want to reiterate here that simply running your best 6 players in every situation is not a guaranteed right answer. So what we do know right now is that Jake pretty much needs to be a lock-in. even with the 5 FNIG members, the Team USA core of Jake, Coleman, and Raucus, I think, is a far stronger foundation to build off. I got no doubt that Jake brings a lot of leadership to the team, which is a huge benefit to everyone else, and they need to continue tapping into that to find success. His Junkrat and Soldier are also both capable of being focal points to build the team around. Moving beyond that, you need a good supporting lineup and DPS partner for him, and so NYXL is the first player that comes to mind as the other star DPS in the team. But the issue here is you can run into some really awkward compositions where the hero picks might not complement each other. In many situations, either one of them may be forced into playing a Tracer, which both feels like a wasted pick on them when they have much better heroes, and also a pick that neither truly excels at, which is where Clockwork comes in, because he's the one who is the Tracer specialist on the team that can complement the picks of either Jake or NYXL. If they can develop Clockwork in that direction, that's where he can truly excel. I do also want to touch up again on Clockwork versus Sabiolbi as a matchup, which is going to be quite important heading into this specific match. Now, Clockwork's playstyle so far is what I would describe as a passive opportunist, which makes sense coming from a TF2 background because Scouts really benefited from that playstyle. And he's going to try to generally play as safe as possible, placing high value on his own life while trying to achieve maximum output during heavy engagements where the focus is taken off him. What you won't see from Clockwork at this stage, though, is huge individual playmaking. That, however, is where you will see Sabiolbi with the direct opposite playstyle. Note that I'm in no way saying, which either playstyle is better than the other, but rather both are different and need to be approached in different ways. Clockwork needs to be aware that Sabiolbi will be hunting him for 1v1s, which can give Houston opportunities to bait Sabiolbi into bad scenarios where Clockwork can turn a duel into a 2v1 instead. They also need to be aware of where their playmaking capability is, which mainly comes out of the hands of Jake, NYXL, or Raucus. So using that knowledge, they can pair with Clockwork to either complement or to be able to complement and assist. Now, the only play combination I can say at this stage, which I'm certain Houston should not look to run, a Mendo and Clockwork together, because that was easily the worst performance of Houston in the preseason.
You've already said that you look at Jake as one of the focal points of leadership and example of top-tier gameplay for the Outlaws, but across the whole match, when you're looking at this matchup, which player do you think is poised to have the most impact on the outcome of the game?
I think this one's going to be fairly obvious, as I've already mentioned his name a lot already. For Houston, the heavy shoulders of which this burden will sit on will be Jake's. While I've said a lot of good things about Jake already, the impact he can have on his team goes both ways. He can simultaneously be the biggest strength and also the biggest weakness on his team at the same time. So for any decision maker on a team, they've also got to be responsible for any bad decisions that are made. Jake's a playmaker, but he's also a greedy player. He wants to go for the hero plays and land the highlight reel-worthy shots. So on one hand, you've got a Jake outplaying Taimu in a Junkrat versus Hog matchup, which after winning charges his entire ult, then allowing him to snowball a bunch more kills on Lee Jung Night Market. And then on the other hand, you've got a Jake who, in the overtime attack of Nimbani versus Sol, abandons his high ground positioning to chase a totally unnecessary kill on a weak keyed and a Soldier 1v1, which then allows the rest of Sol to reclaim lost positioning against Houston in what was the penultimate fight that could have won Houston that map. Jake entirely abandons the Soldier setup strategy altogether on his next respawn, even though it was pretty solid and worked, minus the previous throw. And the change to Farah got shut down so fast, Sol were already getting out of their seats to pack up their gear before Jake's body even hit the ground. On a more positive note, though, Raucus had some huge moments on Zen, where in very difficult scenarios for Houston, he ends up finding solo kills with right clicks during the setup phases, which then give Houston the ability to initiate fights 6 versus 5. So he's also had, a number of successful duels versus Tracer as a Zen, which is going to be very important now going into the NYXL match, where you can believe that Sabiolbi will definitely be on the hunt. So if Raucus can hold his own against Sabiolbi, this is going to give his teammates a lot of space to work with to save his life. And then on top of that, especially if Sabiolbi is kept busy while Clockwork is allowed to go uncontested. So then moving on from the New York side, you probably also don't have to take 3 guesses to know who I'm going to mention here, but it's got to be Sabiolbi, because he's going to be the one to look to dismantle Houston from multiple angles and be a constant threat at all stages of the game. The only big concern I have here for New York is if they put him on Soldier again, which, while he can hold his own on Soldier, much like some of the players on Houston can on their off picks, it's not going to be his primary hero pick, and it's not where he truly shines. And you can really feel the difference when SaberLB's Tracer's off the board, because he's kind of like this pressure pedal with his foot constantly on the neck of the other team. And as soon as he takes his foot off, the difference is huge. So Pine, after that, is also going to need to step up because his Widow got outperformed severely by Fleta on Ilios and kind of overall. And his Genji in that series versus Sol was also a huge letdown. So that being said, though, Pine's Widow is still a constant threat that needs to be addressed, so Houston will likely still need to run NYXL to be in a position to counter-snipe.
All right, last question, just because I think it's a fun one. I won't hold you to it, but if you had to pick a winner, who do you think walks away winning this Week 1 match?
Honestly, it's tough because my head wants to go with New York here. Everything points towards them being specifically more prepared for this particular match. They got less fundamental issues to deal with. Their roster problems are more or less solved now with Jonak arriving. This team literally has no excuse but to win now. On the other hand, though, my heart really wants to go with Houston. This team's potential is absolutely huge, and I feel like their journey has only really just begun. For a lot of the other teams, New York included, they feel like known quantities. We know what they're capable of, and we have expectations to measure them against. For Houston, we've only really just gotten our feet wet. The head coach only just arrived, and their path is still unfolding in real time as we speak. These guys could either go to the moon or completely fail to launch. Currently, I'm betting on the former. They've got a good squad, they got great staff, and the best branding of any team in the league. That's my opinion, though. I do want to say, however, all analysis and criticism I'm making is from an outsider's perspective, and I feel like I need to say this just in case I get flamed, but I do not have any insider knowledge on how Houston or New York run their teams, and there's only so much you can go off of on 2 preseason matches. I've also been particularly harsh on Mendo, I'll admit, but he's a young player who can take it, and he's got a lot of potential ahead of him still, so he's only showed up for 1 map so far, and while I don't think it was impressive, I'll definitely be keeping my eyes peeled to see how far he can really go. If Houston play their cards correctly, I think they could really overtake Dallas as the Western favorites and ignite the flame of Western hope.
Ignite the flame of Western hope. I like that a lot. Make sure to follow AVRL on Twitter at I'm AVRL. That's IMAVRL. I always love having him on the show. He always has such amazing insight. So make sure you do follow him because he's got stuff like that going on all week long on his Twitter. On tomorrow's show, we've got kind of a special one for you. I've actually got Michael from Kangarna. He's going to come in and talk about some of his Season 1 rankings going into the inaugural season. It's going to be kind of a fun one. The last one to kind of send off the show before we get into the inaugural season and start getting into more specific matches. So make sure to check that one out. You don't want to miss it tomorrow. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. Remember, you can find us on the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets, including iTunes, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Podcast Addict, Spotify. We're also on the front page of winstonslab.com. We're on YouTube too. Click on the link in the show notes to find us. One other thing is if you go to highnoonpick'em.com, we've got our own featured Overwatch League Daily Fantasy League. And we're doing the kind of intense one where you actually aren't just picking the winners of matches, but you're picking the winners of maps, and you're also picking the overall score. It's a lot of fun. It's a little bit intense, but if you want to join, there's already almost 50 people signed up to play in that league. You should definitely go ahead, sign up as well. highnoonpick'em.com and just hit on the featured tab. We're on YouTube. You're probably watching this on YouTube, but if you're not, you're listening to an audio, we're on YouTube as well. You can just click on the link in the show notes to find us. And if you want to stay in touch, email me at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com, tweet me at OWL Daily Show, or join our Discord at discord.me/OWL Daily Show. Again, way too much to remember. Just go to overwatchleaguedaily.com. You can find everything right there for you. Thanks for stopping by today. I'll be back tomorrow with Michael for some preseason rankings.